Today, in the spirit of 9/11, that tragedy that we'll never forget, that has shown us clearly how the demonic influence can infiltrate the safest of countries. Just when we feel like everything's okay and nothing can go wrong, bam, look what can happen. And in remembering all these brave souls that went out there to help and all the people that died and the family members lost, we wanted to send out some love to them. We'll never forget. This is a good day to get on the topic of things like this that happen. With the loss of Charlie Kirk, just out of the blue, that beloved soul and his wife and 2 children, and it is so sad leaving them behind. And here was a young man, so courageous, so beloved of the Lord, out there defending the faith. He loved the Lord, loved Our Lady, inching his way into Catholicism, as everybody says, because he really was an expert at defending the faith. Got an education apart from the propagandizing school system that he recognized was already given over to this DEI and all the lie. He stood as a pillar of truth out there in the world. Chip called in and had a really good topic that was very fitting for today. Welcome to candlelightpress.org and catholictv.us, where Christ's light dispels darkness. I'm Mary McMenamin, your host, and today we have Chip Cuthbert. And we got into a really interesting conversation about what's been going on in the world, especially with the loss of Charlie Kirk, blessed conservative, patriot, out there just taking on the world, and a wonderful debater. And we just lost him. God rest his soul, and our prayers go out to his family, his wife, and his lovely daughters. And brought up an interesting topic. And so Chip is here to visit with a question he had.
I was just wondering, with all these shootings, do you think there is chance that much of this is demon possession and demon influence?
That is a great question. It's kind of foremost on everybody's mind, I would suspect, because why so much of this all of a sudden? And it's clearly aimed at a particular view, that conservative, trying to please God, not rationalizing your way around things, but fighting for truth. And a biblical truth that is very recognizable to those who love and serve God, where the world has always been fighting against that. But yes, we are seeing more of that with the loss of Charlie Kirk, who was doing such a wonderful job of presenting truth to the young people and showing them the other side and putting it up for debate against this, what you can call brainwashing. The cartoon that I did with Yuri Bezmenov, where he talks about this ideological subversion on our country. The process had already been complete by the communists, and that they were astounded at how quickly America took to it. Well, it infiltrated all our institutions and our culture, and now we're seeing the major fallout of where this form of relativistic thinking leads, where there doesn't seem to be a final truth. It's all what you think it is, which in the end leaves it open for a power grab, where what really happens isn't the truth trumps evil, but according to this ideology, might is the one that wins, which is why you get a debate, and the ones that fall into that relativistic thinking start attacking the debater. They scream and yell, they make noise, they run on emotion. There's really no room for discussion and debate. Episode 30 left off with Mary and Dr. Ludwig discussing the errors of Russia that Our Lady at Fatima in 1917 had warned would spread to the world unless Russia was consecrated to her Immaculate Heart to offset the offenses being hurled at her and her divine Son.
I don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare.
Listen closely to how Satan's demoralizing active measures by use of humanity's enemies weaken nations destined for destruction. As Mary knows, where one enemy leaves off, another picks up until the brainwashing is complete. At that point, God lets even the greatest nations, once fatally infested with disgruntled fools, get what they asked for: the freedom to be sodomized, the choice to be slaughtered, the tolerance that allows injustice, and promised protections that merely empower violence and chaos.
What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see.
As Mary has, did you catch that, my dear patriots? The brainwashings cannot overcome those who remain under God's protection, which is why, in the end, the battle is really against the church Christ instituted, the body, his bride, of which Christ the head cannot be prevailed against.
Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
Mm-hmm. These are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Mm-hmm. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America, criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. This they don't understand, and it will be the greatest shock for them, of course. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with the benevolent dictator who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of new generation of Soviet assassins. Never mind. He will create false illusions that the situation is under control. Situation is not under control. Situation is disgustingly out of control. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation of people who think they are living at a peacetime. False. The United States is in the state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system.
Indeed it is, but extending beyond the militant systems of enemy nations, it's the system that our first ancestors actually put in action with our first rebellion against God. Created in God's image and likeness, in Christ, though temporarily a little lower than angelic beings we cannot see, those who reject the world's madness will be made higher than these mighty spirits, capable even of judging them. 1 Corinthians 6:3.
However ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy, whether I scare some people or not, I don't give a hoot. If you are not scared by now, nothing can scare you. Unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
It's a prelude to the permanence of hell. Like Yuri, we all must defect from the errors of evil while we still can. But not merely to save our nation, each must embrace God's truth before your fate is sealed in eternity, and the unrepented of sins you would hope to enjoy become the very things by which you will be tortured. If only the world could understand that earth life is not a dress rehearsal. When the curtain falls, that's it.
Penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility.
Okay, so what do we do?
And we look at how the demons operate, and this is the kind of thing that they influence in us. They draw upon our emotions and our pride and our unloving, intolerant views, and have us call everybody else intolerant for not agreeing with our views. It's beyond just hearing views. It's that the demon drives us to insist that others accept our views without any debate. And that is what we're seeing. So when somebody doesn't agree with your views, you shoot them or attack them on the internet, whatever vitriol you can hurl at them, and say that they're the ones that are doing it and it's justified. And that's how demons think. The evil, the unloving, unforgiving, pride-filled approach that they take, where there's no room for debate, is fair and everybody else is wrong. We were talking about Tucker Carlson, weren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, Senator Cruz, Texas Republican. Tucker Carlson criticized him for citing the Bible's urging of support for Israel. Cruz came back firing that Carlson has become increasingly more extreme, to the point of what he describes as being unrecognizable. He actually said something is wrong with Tucker Carlson. His verdict is, I don't know what's wrong, but it's really bad. Is this a demonic influence? We can't say that people are possessed, or something like that, but you think of Mary Magdalene, 7 demons being cast out of her by Jesus. That doesn't mean necessarily she was a serial killer or a prostitute. We don't know. Demons can wreak all kinds of havoc. They can make you sick. They can make you confused, doubt your faith. They have a lot of influence in a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean we're always something completely crazy and out of line that everybody would recognize, like out of The Exorcist. Oh, that person's foaming at the mouth and their head spinning. It could be very subtle things that demonic influence has over us. In the garden, all he had to do was get us to mistrust God when he said, don't eat from this tree of knowledge. Just that little bit of doubt was enough to make him eat it. And there's the fall of humanity. Evil enters in like a virus. And we've been dealing with it ever since. It's embedded into our DNA. Ted Cruz was saying, I don't know what is wrong with him. And after he describes him as being a must-see TV show during the 2020 presidential race, the race riots, the COVID lockdowns, and this former Fox News host is suddenly lost with regard to war, peace, terrorists, and his recent condolences to Osama bin Laden's family. He says, I look at the Tucker today, he's unrecognizable. And he described that Tucker not only gave these condolences to bin Laden's family, but he also implied that perhaps Nazi Germany might have been on the right side in World War II and questioned whether Hamas is even a terrorist group and has displayed a sympathetic view towards authoritarian regimes in Russia and Iran. And he called such positions, quote, bizarre, unhinged, and morally indefensible, and argues that organizations like Hamas and figures like bin Laden must be condemned without equivocation. He went on attacking Trump and jumped on that bandwagon. Chip, you mentioned something about what his religious background is?
Yes, I was curious.
He was brought up Episcopalian. There was an interview from 2013. At the time, Tucker Carlson was 43. They asked, how would you define yourself theologically? And he says, oh, I'm a Christian. And then the interviewer asked, so you grew up an Episcopalian? And he says, yeah, he was baptized that, grew up in California in basically a very secular family, met his wife and a strong Christian, and she got him more serious about his faith, and said that you and your family go to an Episcopal church for what Tucker described as all kinds of, quote, complicated reasons. So the interviewer asked, could you uncomplicate that for us? And he said part of it's inertia, and part of that is the world that I grew up in. Tucker says, I love the liturgy. He says, I can recite it without looking at it, dumb stuff like that. And he says, am I going to defend that? No, says Tucker. It's totally indefensible. I'm a shallow guy. That's why I still go to the Episcopal Church, his words. He says, but I like it. I just don't want to think too hard about my money going to these pompous, blowhard, pagan creeps who run the church, end quote. So the interviewer asked, and what do your kids think about these, quote, pompous folks? And he said, when the chaplain is some twice divorced, recovering alcoholic, 50-year-old woman who talks about Hinduism exclusively, my kids are like, you're a loser. And they're right. So it's sad, he said. Fast forward now to December 2nd, 2024. It's like 9 months ago. Gary Sullivan has an article on him, and it says, being a public figure on Fox News for so long and now branching out on his own, Tucker Carlson's life is more open to outsiders. Normally private about his family and personal life, but after a year and a half of reflecting, he decides to release an interview where he tells of this being mauled by a demon. He says, I was totally confused. I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in, and my wife and dogs had not woken up. They're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I saw 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder, and they're bleeding. So now that this article was published like 9 months ago, or something really happened here, and what's strange that all this commotion didn't even wake up his wife and his dogs, and they're all light sleepers. and he has physical manifestations of this attack. The problem for Tucker is that his Episcopalian roots, as he says, and his fledgling faith did nothing to prepare him for such an encounter with this level of evil. He says, I had no idea what was happening, what this was, and so he explains that the next morning he woke and thought that it was the weirdest dream I've ever had, and then I saw blood on my sheets and realized it wasn't a dream at all. So he called this one evangelical Christian that he knew well enough could handle a weird story about his private life and his family. Those who know Tucker know that he's on a faith journey away from the Episcopalian theology and more toward the Catholic faith. And in this separate interview with LifeSite News, he said, quote, a lot of my closest friends are Catholic. They're the most fervent, sincere, on-target Christians I know. As the church-like structure collapses, some of the members of the church seem even stronger. Tucker is like free to pursue and speak the truth, and he realizes that the Episcopalian church, as he describes, lost it. He said, I truly despise the Episcopal Church in a lot of ways. They're for gay marriage because it's trendy. It's another way to express how hip they are. They don't care at all what God thinks of it because they actually don't believe in God, he says. And then the fact that they sanction abortion. Are you joking? A church is for abortion? What? He says. So a little perspective on this. When there's demonic activity like exorcisms and they can't cast them out, pastors try to cast them out, the tough cases always end up in the Catholic Church, in the hand of our exorcists, because we have, as an institution, being the church that's set up by Jesus Christ, the kingdom of God on earth, and he only set up one, and it's the whole lineage, the fulfillment of the priesthood, the sacrificial system, because we have the Eucharist, we have the real presence, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, every single Mass. This is the fulfillment of Judaism, the religion that Jesus was. And so we also have the office of casting out demons. That was the power given to the apostles. It's given through the laying of hands and through the ordination of the priesthood to consecrate. And all these powers given the apostles continued on in succession from them. It didn't die with them. So we still have the institution and the sacraments of healing and anointing and healing from demonic activity. So Father Josiah, an Orthodox priest, reflected on how sad it is that some Christians, like Tucker, are so unaware and ill-equipped to handle demonic attacks. And he said, I just recently watched a short video of Tucker Carlson describing an experience he had a year and a half ago with a demon that attacked him, actually mauled him. He said that he had no way to interpret it because he didn't believe in demons. See, that's the best place for those buggers. They can have their way with you much easier if you don't even believe in them because they're stealth. Tucker said that in his faith tradition, he knew no one who had ever dealt with a demon, and it was not part of his Episcopalian church tradition. So as an Orthodox Christian, of course, that is so sad and so horrific, not speaking about knowing or studying your opponent who wants you dead and in hell. This is basically a recipe for spiritual disaster, as he describes it. In another video, this Catholic exorcist, Father Carlos Martins, seems to confirm that what Tucker Carlson experienced is known as demonic vexation. And apparently that's what has happened. And yes, I've had the dream thing, and they try to get you back. If you leave your lukewarm life behind, the things of this world, and you try to seek the Lord 100%, you're going to run into troubles. The demons are upset that the Lord has pillaged his kill. He says that vexation, he describes, this Catholic exorcist, Father Carlos Martins, is a stage of demonic influence after temptation and obsession, but before possession. Okay? So it's in between those stages. Remember, he had this experience, and we're seeing the way he's thinking now, which is very, very strange and not like he was. And vexation is described as any kind of brief physical attack or poltergeist event where the demon is allowed by God to physically attack its victims. And you're thinking, well, why would God allow that? Well, it seems that Tucker Carlson and other, as he describes, nominal Christians have been left alone by the devil. So there's really no immediate need to know about spiritual warfare. Because if you're not really getting out there, you're not really a threat to the kingdom of darkness. So the minute you start having an effect, bringing people closer to the fullness of truth, as found in the Catholic Church, you become more and more of a threat to the kingdom of darkness. He went on that it was only when Tucker became free to pursue and speak the truth that he began to call out the evil and corruption that he has experienced firsthand living and working in Washington, D.C. for part of his career as a journalist. The act of truth-telling in a world full of lies is dangerous. And what better demonstrates that than what happened to Charlie Kirk and the assassination attempts made on President Trump? He said that the closer he gets to exposing the devil's plans in this country and the world, the closer evil is to getting back at him. And apparently some people, when they cannot be silenced by the demons, look what can happen. God allows some people to get struck down, and they go out of this world a martyr for truth. It's actually a great honor for him to be serving truth in that way when leaving this world. God rest his soul and bring peace and understanding and forgiveness to his family for such a heinous thing. I mean, who could forgive but by divine grace? But it's actually, in the bigger picture, a great honor for the soul who is found serving truth and serving the Lord on their final day. The Master finds him doing just that when he meets him face to face. So this person comes back and says, good for him to tell the truth, but he really needs to be equipped, he's talking about Tucker, with the grace of the sacraments and the apprehension of the deposit of faith before he gets mauled again. Now understand, this mauling can be in a purely spiritual form that doesn't leave any marks on the body. And based on the way he's talking now, there's a case you could make that that demon got into his head. Okay? He said that we know God permits evil in order to bring about a greater good. Tucker, if you're reading this, congratulations. Your journalism is over the target. Now, for the greater good, make haste to find a Catholic church and sign up for OCIA, the Order of Catholic Initiation for Adults. Sadly, we are now witnessing how the Lord's call can be squandered through reluctance or hesitation. And the Tucker we know is now considered unrecognizable in his views and his ideologies. This is our first podcast attempt. As you can see, it didn't go right. That's why we have Chip here on the cell phone. So it will get better with time, but we wanted to just cover the latest news. We'll be improving as we go, and thank you for joining us. God bless you all. And we'll see you in the next podcast. Or visit our cartoons, candlelightpress.org, catholictv.us, and you can see the latest animations, which are a lot of fun. We've got Father Sebastian on there, giving his Catholic answers, live streams of all kinds of things. Great talks, great shows, music, got it all there. So God bless, and take care.